Hey folks, before I start, first a correction or better an addition. I found this here from H.P. Allen's book Star Names, but if you have seen the episode on Sishumara and the Draco constellation, you know I will not agree with his identification as being Daphanes. He has this to say about the constellation Shishumara. On page 200, the Hindus from whom the Greeks are said to have borrowed it, although the reverse of this may have been the case, knew it as Shishumara or Simshumara, and it was changed in later days to Zizumara, a porpoise also described to Draco. I believe he has it mixed up. Ian Gar provides us with enough evidence of a close contact between the Shishumara constellation and Dhruva, the latter being identified as the pole star, to be able to connect it with exactly Draco. Its location was at the nail in the sky, the northern ecliptic pole. Delphinus may then often be represented in the vicinity of divinity. Its placement in the stars is nowhere near that pole. It is believed that the constellation of the Dolphin contains 9 stars that represent the 9 muses. Delphinus saves Arion, the lesbian lyre player, from drowning and earns his place in the heavens. Yet in another version, probably older, Delphinus gets his place in the stars for helping Oceanus trace and bring back his wife Amphitrite. Delphinus didn't get the attention from me that it deserves. The gentle animal may just as well be among those fish that are depicted on the lids of some of those curious Cycladic ceramics. But I have spent enough time and more already on that fish track. I want to return to the Aegean Sea. Loads of swastikas there, and I will try and shove some in here and there, but the main focus will be on lodestones and compasses for yet another few. The oldest written sources for the origin of the word magnet are from a 1st century historian Pliny the Elder. Pliny, Roman Emperor Vespasian's friend and author, bases his rendition on a 2 centuries earlier written poem by Nicander of Colophon or Nicander of Alexandria. Nicander was a 150 BC Alexandrian physician, grammatician, and poet. Only 2 of his writings remain, that is the Tyriaka on antidotes for snake poisoning and the Alexipharmaca, also a work on antidotes, but for poisonous food this time. These poetic books have been the basis for sciences like medicine, astronomy, and geology, etc., until the late Roman era and during the Byzantine period. This poem by Nicander recounts the story of a Cretan shepherd called Magnitis, whose sandals play tricks on him in a cave on Mount Ida. According to the story, the nails in his sandals were attracted to the magnetite in the cave. However, some say the origins of the story lay much further back in time, to at least 1000 BC, and does not relate to Crete at all. First of all, Magnitis, the name given to the shepherd by Pliny, is a name of at least 2 different mythical kings, both of divine descent, of an ancient native Greek people called the Magnitis. They originally lived in what later would become Thessaly. The Iliad mentions this old tribe taking part in the Greek war against Troy. Thing is, the Magnetis were not present on Crete. That was a Minoan stronghold for several millennia. Shortly before the beginning of the 1st millennium, it were the Mycenaeans who had the rulership over that island. For a shepherd being named after a foreign people or tribe would be rather curious in my humble opinion, but yeah, not totally impossible. What's more incredulous, however, is the mention of his shoes being stuck on the mountain due to the nails in them, or because of an iron piece of his staff. No way a shepherd has iron in his shoes, if he even had any shoes. The story having an older source may be, but I suspect it to be a total hoax altogether. Mount Ida on Crete appears to have no magnetite veins worthy of mention. Maybe there is more to be found on another Mount Ida, located on the Anatolian coast. The Magnitis region of origin is called Magnesia. Two of their main colonies are called Magnesia as well, and they are both on the Anatolian coast as well. Magnesia, nowadays known as Manisa, near Izmir, Turkey, at Mount Sipylum, and the other is located on the banks of a tributary of the Meander River, a serpentine river that flows into the Aegean Sea at Melite. This river was an ancient deity. Meandros also lends his name to a pattern often used in Greek and Roman decorations. Griki is a modern name for it. According to Marija Gimbutas, famous for her back then controversial Kurgan hypothesis, the meander pattern originates in the Upper Paleolithic some 40,000 years ago. We have seen it on the lunar calendars of the Mesiric settlements in Ukraine. For Gimbutas, the meander pattern has always been connected to water, where Karoli Kerenci, a Hungarian scholar, wrote that the meander is the figure of a labyrinth in linear form. I also found a link to the meandros grip. The meandros grip was used to strengthen the hands for such things as wrestling, the discus throwing, javelin, bow and arrow, and the sword. It was as well instrumental in hand-to-hand combat. So the Magnitis founded a colony along that river on a relative short distance from the Minoan colony Melite. All three magnesias are rich in specific ore to which the Magnitis lended their name, namely magnetite, magnesium, and manganese. I noticed a lot of unclarity about which exact region it is that eventually lended its name to magnets. I think it may be easier to attribute the origins of the name to the people, the Magnitis, since it is that which connects the regions. Contrary to the story he hangs up about the origins of the magnet's name and its discovery, Pliny is quite clear about the value of magnetite. He states that the original Magnesia in northern Greece has the best magnetite, purer than the Ethiopian kind. Geological survey shows that the magnetite found in Thessaly at Mount Ossa is indeed of unequal purity. The Magnetis are an enigma on their own. Their origins are unclear, although most agree on them being one of the original Greek people. The Homeric Iliad mentions them, but they also appear in Anatolia during later times, and no way that I can solve that riddle, but I do find it peculiar that Pliny or any other ancient historian ever made a link between these people and magnets, especially with the former's knowledge on the magnetite quality in their region of origin. A book on stones and how to work them is called a lapidary, from the word lapis, which means stone. There are several such ancient books, but some are merely plagiarizing older books. Sometimes the author writes statements about certain minerals without even having seen or touched them. The lodestone is found in the lapidary of Theophrastus of Ereus, the 3rd millennium BC, the 3rd century BC, excuse me. He called it the Heraclean stone, just like Plato had called it before him. What Heraclea he may mean with this is uncertain. There are about 20 plus historical places with that name, and one Cycladic island, although they probably refer to Heraclea, the city that was founded in Lydia, also near Mount Sipylum. Pliny is unclear in his rendition of Theophrastus' account of the Heraclean stone. He repeats Theophrastus' mistakes when describing finding locations, of which he, being a knowledgeable historian, should have been able to correct. Instead, Pliny does not seem to be aware for some reason. He does describe the quality of the magnets of that region as bad. In much later times, it would indeed be mainly magnesium that was mined in that Sipylum region. The quality of the magnetite there is low because of the high hematite levels in it. The fact is, he is correct in his account on where to find the best quality, and this underlines the peculiarity of his bizarre mistakes. Pliny confuses magnesian dolomite, for example, with magnetite, calling both of them magnes lapis. Pliny refers to a mythical stone called adamas, which is mostly found in gold mines as large seed-sized granules, and it is described as being the hardest stone ever, known only to kings. This causes many to state he refers to diamonds, while others assume he describes a stone he never actually saw in person. In other words, possibly another story based on hearsay. Ovid calls this adamas magnes lapis, but because adamas linguistically relates to adamare, which means to love passionately, it is possible that, again, this is a mistake. It is a bit of a knot, difficult if not impossible to unravel. The names given to magnets vary a lot. Stone of the righteous among the Sumerians, like I mentioned in another episode. Heraclean stone, we just saw earlier, and at some point the Greeks called it magnes litos, stone of magnesia. The term magnetis for the lodestone is first used by Euripides, according to Forbes. Over 800 years later, Hesychius of Alexandria quotes Euripides' friend and also one of the famed Greek tragedy poets, Sophocles, who uses the name Lydian rock in the 5th century BC, although that is probably a synonym rather for the so-called touchstone. Theophrastus claims the touchstone and the magnetis litos can often be found together, making a somewhat clearer distinction between the two. Touchstone used to be called Lydian stone. It was an utensil of merchants, metallurgists, goldsmiths, and such. To ensure the mineral composition of their merchandise was indeed the noble metals they were claimed to be. They used chert, for example. The coloring after rubbing is not too accurate method, but it is certainly less destructive than using the so-called aqua fortis or acid. Lydian stone is now mainly lydite or basanite. I also found someone referencing the so-called Jewish stone in association with the magnet, but all I could find was this, Lapis judaicus, a fossilized spine of a sea urchin, long valued for his medicinal properties in the treatment of kidney stones. I don't know about the explanation of this encyclopedia here. Honestly, it sounds a bit like snake oil advertisements, if you ask me. But all that on a side note. We are told that the scholars of antiquity were only fascinated by the ability of attraction and spent their days philosophizing about that. Thales of Miletus, 6th century BC, apparently stated that there was a female and male kind of magnetic stone and pondered upon whether they had a soul or something the Romans later would call anima. more than he experimented with the stones, so we are told. None of his writings survived, however. His identification of what had a soul and what not seems to be determined by its ability to move or the ability to let other materials move. The fact that he mentions two genders in stones, however, should indicate that he was aware of the different behaviors when two stones were brought together, an attracting and a repelling force. That these learned people never played around with them long enough to figure out bipolarity, I find hard to accept, but I will come back on that later. Roman scholars like Pliny would call it ferrum vivum, or quick iron. 5 centuries later, Lucretius, believed to have been a Gaul, born in northern Italy, wrote a great deal about ferrum vivum in his book De Rerum Natura. Contrary to Thales of Miletus, he describes the working of the magnetic stone by using the atomistic materialistic philosophy of the 3rd century BC Epicureans. He writes how Samothracian iron rings, which are hollow and are to be filled with charms, are attracted because the lodestone expels atoms of air, causing a vacuum between the ring and the stone, and this vacuum is then filled up by the responding air atoms locked inside the iron ring. Although the atomism of the Epicureans was revolutionary philosophy at their time, it is still in striking contrast to the rather spiritual ponderings we are told their predecessor philosophers had on the miraculous forces of the Litos Magis. The ancients contributed not only a soul to the lodestone, but also unknown magical powers known only to the initiates, deities, witches, and magicians. In an old magazine called Zoist, I found a hypothesis on the myth of Tantalos, a deity revered by the Magnitis. When Tantalos, a Lydian king of divine descent and primal father of the mythical line of the Tantalids, is punished by Zeus for serving human meat on a banquet, he is condemned to Tartarus. There he suffers hunger and thirst. When he tries to drink, the water resides, and when he tries to bite fruit, it is as if his lips repel it, an eternal punishment. This feature, the repelling force described in the myth, says the author, indicates the repelling forces of magnetic stones. Other sources name the journey of Ulysses. During his Odyssey, he meets the Colchian witch goddess Circe. Circe, daughter of the Titan sun god Helios, would have offered him a lodestone for him to use it to navigate beyond the gate of Gibraltar. There is a passage in the Odyssey in which Alcinous says to Ulysses that Phocaean ships are regulated and guided by a spirit. Phocaea was on the Anatolian coast. They were forced to flee their city-states under the pressure of the Persians and are thought to have founded Marseille, leaving traces also within the Etruscan culture. Also, her niece Medea was supposedly performing natural magic in which magnetic stones were used. Pliny describes a Median black stone in the possession of Medea of Colchis. Sometimes it is referred to as Medea's gem and considered very valuable. She is probably best known for her flight from home on the Colchian coast, together with Jason after he stole the golden fleece. Jason happens to be from the tribe of the Magnitis. Although Medea is depicted as of bad character, Circe's evil magic seems to be limited to forcing sailors to stay with her on the island east of Sicily, to which she was banned by Zeus. But that's it for now, folks. Piecing the next part on lodestones together, and I eventually will end with the swastikas once more. Special thanks to those who take the effort of encouraging me every now and then with this project here. It's much appreciated. And yeah, you all have a nice day.